Yeah.
Yeah.
My fault.
Okay, so, and you want me to stand here?
Nice.
I've got a really big head, so I could block that whole thing up.
You're good. I'll move the camera if I need to. To go.
Good to go.
Yeah.
Okay, well, good morning. I'm going to spend time talking to each of you here, although I think we've also got a lot of people that are watching in or that will watch later. So I want to thank you for coming today. And let me start by saying part of the effort that brings us to you today is to recognize not just the responses that we're getting from the employee survey, but to also just acknowledge the work that the agency is doing and acknowledge the needs that we have in front of us and frankly, the vision of where we're going. And so as you interact today, we want this to be as informal as possible, given the setting. We hope that you ask questions. We hope that I can answer those questions and expect more of this in the future as we go forward. The goal here is to really bring awareness to some of the things that we're doing. What we found in the employee survey is that there's elements of what we're doing at the leadership level that maybe aren't as readily apparent to all members of the agency. We want to make sure that we can kind of bring that understanding and togetherness into the conversation, but we also want you to be able to ask questions so that, you know, frankly, we can answer some of the things that maybe are on your mind that we haven't been thinking of. So I'll do my very best today to kind of walk us through where we sit for a state of the agency and state of transportation. It'll be brief. Because I want to make sure that we open up time for questions towards the end. The other thing I would say is some of you have seen portions of this before because we've been working on this for a little bit. We're really trying to bring an understanding of where the transportation industry is going and maybe where it has been going for quite some time and really reflect where our work comes into that. And sometimes it feels like we're, you know, a little behind playing catch up, whether that's, you know, autonomous vehicles or what have you. Other times we're right out in front and we're leading that effort. And in some ways we want to be out in front in almost every way. We want to be out in front because those things that we don't get to inform and guide end up guiding us. And so we want to create an environment where we can be out in front, and we have been as an agency. We want to continue to do that. And so that's the purpose of the conversation today. So next slide. So the agenda, who are we? Where are opportunities for change and how has that change been impacting us already? And because it's been happening for quite some time. And then the legislative funding packages and looking forward. And then I want to spend some time on the employee engagement survey, recognizing that I'll hit as much as I can and knowing that that will be unsatisfactory for the whole group because it's deep, right? And there's a lot of conversation for us to get to. And so I want to make sure that we're addressing what we can at the top line, but then understanding that there's more work to do in the employee engagement arena. We want to make sure that we're hearing from everybody across the agency. Next slide. So as we think about the state of transportation, you heard me say at the beginning, the transportation industry, the transportation sector is really changing around us, whether that's early and quick adoption of electric vehicles, whether it's connected autonomous vehicles, whether it is elements of the transportation industry for ITS and other things that are continuing to guide how we operate a system. That is all just on the roadway side. As we start to think about the connection to a multimodal network, as we start to think about a connection to how we increase active transportation opportunities, and as we start to engage in an understanding that our transportation system hasn't always served every member of our community, and we need to do that. And that's our role, that's our job, and we've been working on that. And frankly, we're not the same agency that we used to be. Next slide. I like to start with a slide that really talks about where we were. And, you know, we don't have that in the slide presentation for today, but I'll just say, you know, we started as an agency getting out of the mud, right? I mean, that was really the slogan a little over 100 years ago. That was singularly focused, right? It really targeted the roadway improvements and the roadway necessities. And those things are still important for our agency. I don't want to discount that. In fact, quite the opposite. I want to celebrate and lift all boats as we start to think about the transportation choices and options that we have available to us. But as you can see on the screen, and this is just a snapshot, we are much more than just getting out of the mud. We are much more than just a highway or a roadway agency. And you all know that. right? Everybody across the agency is working within a division, is working within a section of our agency that is delivering on things that are much broader than just a highway network. You're delivering on revenue and regulatory efforts for the agency so we can keep functioning. You're delivering on active transportation, building ways for us to get to school safely, right? Our kids to get to school safely. Those kinds of things are important. And again, with the increasing population we have in the state, it's a great place to live. It's more important now than ever that we continue to think to the future and recognize what we need to put in place for Oregonians that will come after us as we go on. Of course, maintaining and improving the roadways is vital. That's core to our mission. We understand that that's not going away. And in fact, it shouldn't go away. It should be part of the foundational work that we do, and it has been and will continue to be in our efforts as an agency long into the future. And then rail and freight. Everything up here, with the exception of the one element in roadway, has been added or is new or is something that is in addition to what we started out as in 1913 timeframe. Next slide. So we see an array of opportunities to modernize our system. And when I say modernize the system, it is to bring opportunities, access, and availability so that people can make choices that they've historically not been able to make in the transportation system. That's an important factor because we can't make those choices for people. And that's probably what we've done for years in the transportation industry. I'm not saying ODOT, right? So none of this is a pejorative ODOT statement. In fact, the opposite is true. I think ODOT has led in a lot of ways, and that's why I was excited to come here. But we also see that the transportation industry hasn't always served every member of our society. It hasn't served everybody in Oregon for sure. And we have opportunities, and that comes both in guidance, it comes in policy, it comes in funding to really modernize the system to create choices and create opportunity for people that haven't historically had it. Next slide. So opportunities for innovation, addressing congestion. It's no secret to any of you that have driven through all portions of the state that we have multiple pockets in our state where congestion is hampering not just our ability to move for recreational or discretionary trips, but for our ability to move the economy, our ability to stay globally competitive. Congestion impacts that, and we are working on ways to address that. It's a hard job because that means we're looking at ways to complement the system overall. What opportunities can come into the equation that allow us to create those choices, create opportunities for other modes of travel, and alleviate congestion all at the same time. So you see bottleneck removals, whether that's an Ox Lane project that connects to ramps to increase safety, or congestion pricing. Right now, we're embarking on a congestion pricing effort or a tolling effort in the Portland region. It's a big job. There's a lot of work going into that. We have a seismic issue and we have a climate resiliency issue in our state. And again, this is not unique to Oregon. And I want to be crystal clear. This is across the country and it impacts every part of the country in a different way, depending upon where you live. If you look at Anchorage right now, for example, they're experiencing a significant weather increase, or excuse me, a temperature increase for, a summertime that they're about to start where they haven't had much precipitation. Well, we've kind of had the exact opposite, right? We've been experiencing a significantly higher level of precipitation that is causing a different reaction, and climate resiliency is something that we have to talk about. One of the things that I've said quite often has been this: if not us, then who? And that's an important factor when we start to think about the needs of the system. There is nobody else that is charged or responsible for addressing these things that we are charged with addressing. Even if it feels like it's additive and our workload has gotten too significant, because it has. And I want to own that for you, and we'll talk about that a little bit later in the engagement survey portion. It's still us. And that's an important thing because that comes with an accountability, it comes with an understanding, and it also comes with a lot of hard work ahead of us to make sure that we get it right. But climate resiliency and responding to the impacts associated with climate change are really front and center to the work that we have to do. You heard me mention before increasing equity and addressing past harms. Part of that is acknowledging that we have harmed in the past. We have made, and when I say we, again, I'm not saying anybody in this room, I'm not saying those on the Zoom call, I'm saying those in the transportation sector have made decisions that have increased harm for members of our communities that frankly haven't had a voice and haven't had the ability to have those conversations or have a seat at the table. We have a role in fixing that. We have a role in addressing that. And part of that starts with acknowledging those harms and recognizing that we can build a better path forward. Reducing the harms of the transportation system, though, don't just end with increasing our level of equity and our level of diversity in the conversation. They end with recognizing our impact across the board. So this is the people that we serve. This is the environment that we live in. This is the access that can be provided by the things that we do. All of those are very important elements and all on our plate. Again, if not us, then who? We are responsible for creating a path to improvement in all of those areas. Will we solve it all overnight? No, we won't solve it all overnight. But if we don't acknowledge that there's an issue to be addressed, we won't have a part in participating towards that solution. And then finally, developing sustainable funding mechanisms. We have opportunities available to us. They're difficult. We all know the gas tax is a declining revenue source. We're losing our buying power of the dollar, not just because of the gas tax not increasing at a rate that's commensurate with inflation, but because inflation is increasing well beyond what anybody would have expected. And so as you start to think about the buying power of the dollar, not to mention the fact that up until recently, we haven't had a federal increase in funding. And recently that's been a great infusion, but it's not sustainable long-term as we start to think about the funding sources being predominantly derived from gas tax and then fees associated with what we collect through DMV and commerce and compliance. Next slide. So our strategic action plan. When I came in, I had the benefit of working with the commission and the leadership team did, and the commission had a goal. The commission had a vision that comes from the governor, that comes into the commission. It came through some values that are really solid to me, which is we had priorities across the board. And we still do. So we have a lot of priorities as an agency, and everything that everybody in this agency does is vitally important to Oregonians. I absolutely believe that to be true, and I feel privileged to work alongside each of you. One of the things we notice, though, is when everything's a priority, it becomes difficult to then say, what are those priorities? Where do you see yourself in those priorities? And I may not see myself in a priority that somebody else is working on because it's one of 300, right? So we narrowed to 3 important priorities, recognizing that the things we do going forward have to fit within these 3 categories. We have to focus on equity. We have to focus on modernizing the system, and we have to focus on sufficient and reliable funding. And I will tell you that both of those words are important as we start to think about the requirements that we have in front of us as an agency and as a transportation sector. Has to be sufficient enough to do the things that we need to do. And it has to be reliable. It can't be something that continues to lose its buying power. So we have big things in motion. We were the first state to institute a gas tax. We're likely to be the first state to, at scale, introduce something in the road usage charge arena. These are important things as we start to think about Oregon being out in front of innovation and having it be consistent with our strategic action plan priorities. The last thing I'll say on the strategic action plan is this. The word action is in there on purpose. We've got a commission that is driving us to take actionable steps towards outcomes. We all work within long range plans, right? 20, 30, 40-year plans for what we expect out of the transportation system, and that's still important. Strategic action plan is targeted at taking action and actionable steps over a 2 to 3 year period. Next slide. So our approach is now closer to reality. We have additional funding, and I want to talk a little bit about the federal side, but let me talk first about the state side that came in House Bill 2017. So next slide. The House Bill 2017 funding package targeted many of those things that you saw earlier on the slides. And so one of the things that I'm really proud of is the leadership team, as well as divisions and many of you sitting in this room really started to chart a course for how we could be competitive long range and long term and into the future, right? So these things aren't happening by accident. We aren't just reactive. In fact, quite the opposite. House Bill 2017 was a fantastic example of the state of Oregon and the legislature trusting ODOT to move forward and deliver on the needs of our state. Congestion relief in the Portland metro area, specifically funded in House Bill 2017. There are projects across the state, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Increases in statewide public transportation, Safe Routes to School, local funding, because the local system, again, you heard me say earlier, it's not just about our state system. It's how do we complement each other and get the right improvements on the ground for those communities that need them, whether they're state or federal or local. And quite honestly, most members of the public, they don't care whose facility they're on. They care about being able to get where they need to go. And then Connect Oregon funding, again, developing a program that allows us to fund other aspects of the system over and above just, on the highway side. So next slide. As you look across the state, we're about halfway through the funding package for House Bill 2017. And you can see about half of the projects now are in design. The other half, as you combine the under construction and completed, the other half are in process right now in construction. That is huge. I can't thank the agency enough for all the work that has gone into delivering on the promises that the legislature asked us to deliver on in House Bill 2017. It was only 5 years ago, a little over 5 years ago, that the legislature endorsed House Bill 2017. And look at what we've accomplished. Look at what you've accomplished as it relates to delivering on those promises. And that's just the projects. That's not all of the other things that we've been doing as an agency that continue to deliver on what House Bill 2017 was. House Bill 2017 was a vote of confidence in the agency and will continue to be as we hit our delivery targets and recognizing that it's not done. House Bill 2017 was not the last time we'll have a legislative conversation about funding. Next slide. The urban mobility strategy is a complement to those projects to House Bill 2017. You saw the first bullet in House Bill 2017 was addressing congestion in the Portland area. We created the urban mobility office to really stand up a different way of delivering projects. Not different, better, different. And the reason I say that is because these projects require a different level of coordination and cooperation as you start to think about how we interact with jurisdictions in the metro region, the local metropolitan planning organization, transit agencies. All of those are cooperative elements of each of these projects as we start to think about what the urban mobility strategy is designed to do. The urban mobility strategy is at the big picture. It's about coordinating and cooperating across agencies, across jurisdictions to create the transportation network and system that we expect and that those in Portland are looking for us to deliver on. Not just us, but other jurisdictions as well. When you think about the projects associated with them, there are 5 main projects with that. 6. There's the IFAC Rose Quarter project, there's the Interstate Bridge project, there is the I-205 project and the Boone Bridge project at the southern end, and then all of that encompassed with the I-5 and I-205 congestion pricing program. They're all tied together. They are part of a single strategy, and the strategy is working. Oregon 217 has gone to construction. In about 3 years, that project will be complete. That is a significant improvement on 217 on the western side of the Portland region that will bring economic and congestion relief for the region. 205 improvements project, one of our largest projects that ODOT's ever delivered. We're going to construction with that, and we will be in the water this summer working on the seismic readiness for that bridge, the Abernathy Bridge associated with that project. These are huge successes for the agency and for the region, and demonstrations of the fact that the urban mobility strategy and the cooperative nature with our partners is working. Next slide. So you heard me say before that we set a tone. So House Bill 2017, we want to thank the legislature for that. Our strategic action plan, we want to thank the commission for that. And I want to thank my peers, not just in this room, but those that aren't in this room that really helped guide some of the strategic action planning. And then we also want to thank those that have been providing input from outside of the agency to say these things are important. We need you to be thinking about these things, ODOT. We started listening to that. We started creating a path that said, how do we become competitive for what we think might be coming? And in the last 6 months, really, what we saw is we actually positioned ourselves really well. And I'm really proud of the fact that we had so many that were helping to contribute to the fact that we have to create a path for funding that's coming from our federal partners to work with the things that we have in place. And we did that. As we look across the different mechanisms and the different policies that are put in place by the federal funding that came in the November timeframe, you see investments in active transportation, bridges, EV charging infrastructure, which we were well out in front of, resilience for the seismic needs of our bridges across the state, and safety. Let me spend a moment on EV infrastructure. I had the benefit of working and talking with other states along the West Coast and across the country. What I can tell you is along the West Coast, there are 3 states that are really leading in this, and they happen to all be along the coastline. Oregon, Washington, and California are really expanding an EV network and EV infrastructure in ways that the rest of the country is looking to us as the guiding light and the guiding principles of how to do it. In fact, I've been in some conversations where some states were so surprised by the amount of EV infrastructure funding coming in from the federal infrastructure bill that they don't know what to do with it. That is a huge benefit to us in Oregon to recognize these things before those funding opportunities come and to be poised and positioned for them. And again, I'm really proud of the work that our team has done collectively. All 4,800 of us, or however many we have in the agency right now, because you've positioned us to really accept every dollar that's coming in from our federal partners. And that's huge because not every state can say that. Next slide. In addition to those investments that I mentioned before, federal investments in transit, $200 million additional formula funds. Again, to that strategy that we've been talking about, how we play a part. We are not the only part in a transportation system and network. That is a significant investment. Historic investment in passenger rail. Some of these will come as grant opportunities and competitive opportunities, but I have no reason to believe we won't have those opportunities available to us because of how well we were positioned as an agency. Carbon reduction efforts, discretionary grants for new funding administered by the federal government. Some of these we don't even have guidance for yet, but we believe that we'll be in a position to inform and successfully receive some of those federal funds. And then increased investment in the local priorities. Now, all of this feels like quote unquote project work. And I want to tell you that the project work is really important. It's a significant aspect. It's one of the more visible elements of the agency. But these funding opportunities come from the policy work and from all of the planning work, and they come from the support that we get from our partners in DMV. They come from those in commerce and compliance, everybody working together across this agency to help inform and improve our ability to receive these funding opportunities. It takes all of us. And this one ODOT mentality is one that I believe strongly in. Everybody across this agency has a role to play and has been playing it. And we see that in the federal investment, and I'm excited about what we've received. Next slide. The final allocation of $400 million that came in the discretionary portion of the federal funds was recently adopted by the commission. As you look across, you see the commission funded a lot of things. And you see in those things that they funded business and workforce development. That is huge. We have to grow the business and the workforce in order to do the work that we need to do. You can't just presume that it's going to be there. Match for competitive grants. Again, this is being forward thinking. If we have federal grants coming and they haven't shown up yet, we need to make sure that we have the federal match, or excuse me, the state match available in order to secure as much of that funding as we can. So the commission and again, the agency team that's working on this has really helped position us well for that. Continued investment in ADA, local climate planning, that's partnership with DLCD and our local jurisdictions, innovative mobility program, a new program really started at the commission level for micro mobility and providing access for things within the agency that we haven't historically led on. All of these things are part of those discretionary dollars that the commission set a programmatic level for, and we're now in the process of moving towards selecting projects. Next slide. As you think about that split, again, you start to see the very first slide that we started with was we are much more than roads. We do a lot of things within the agency, and this is again an example of that. And I wanted to make specific note though, the maintenance and preservation. So one of the things that needs to be stated often is that when you build new things, regardless of who they are to serve and where they are to serve, whether that's a different mode, whether that's a roadway need, whether it's a transit need or what have you, you have to be able to maintain and operate those things. And that's not typically in the project funded category. That comes in another funding realm. So we were able to allocate some of that funding in maintenance and operation needs, and we have more needs for that coming that I'll talk about in just a little bit. Again, road and interchange improvements, 12%, 49% in maintaining a sustainable and equitable system. Next slide. But the mountain is huge. So this is project-based funding. These are allocations of funding for specific things that the agency has been working on. In our history, you see the OTIA programs and the STIP program and the ARA funding and JTA kind of peaking out in the 2008 to 2010 timeframe at about $800 million. As we look to where we're about to go and the work that the teams across the agency have been working on, you see we have a pretty steep uphill climb. It's a lot of work in front of us. And again, none of this takes into account the fact that it's going to cost us more to operate and maintain those things that we have. So we have big things in front of us, and that's why we need to build towards not just the staffing understanding, not just recognizing those things that are coming before they happen to us, as I mentioned earlier. But we need to build towards an understanding of delivering these projects right, because these projects and this uphill climb and the things that we have in front of us are going to be here for the next 100 years in our state. So we are setting the tone for what the future of this state will look like from a transportation perspective. I'm proud of that, but we're also accountable to that. And so again, I go back to, if not us, then who? This is us, and this is us with our partners. This is us delivering on the things that Oregonians and those outside of Oregon, frankly, because there's a federal investment lens here also. They're all expecting out of us. Next slide. There's limitations on the funding though. So you heard me mention, it doesn't include maintenance and operations. It doesn't include other elements. Well, the limitations is that it rarely includes those operating funds. It's increasingly directed towards specific projects or even categories that equate to specific projects. And it lacks the ability for surge staffing that we might need in order to deliver on those things. So we can't sit back and just celebrate the moment that is good, which by the way, we are in. We are in a good moment as it relates to the federal dollars. We can't just sit back though and expect that that's going to happen. And I know none of you are doing that. In fact, I hear the strain in everybody and in the conversations that I'm able to have across the agency. Next slide. So as we look forward, looking ahead, what can we expect? Next slide. Well, our future looks like congestion managed in the metro area. So when we talk about what is the vision of the agency, we want to make sure that we're managing congestion. You notice I didn't say build our way out of congestion. It is managing congestion. It's a complement to all those different modes and the accessibility options that might present themselves within all communities across Oregon. We want widespread EV adoption to reduce the carbon emissions and improve air quality across the state of Oregon. Most of you already know, you've heard me say 40% of our greenhouse gas production in the state of Oregon comes from transportation uses. We have an obligation and an opportunity paired together to really make a dent in that. And that comes at least as a starting point through EV adoption. And that's not the only thing that will help there. Lifeline routes will need to be upgraded and will be upgraded in anticipation of the Cascadia event. That's not the if it happens, that's the when it happens. And our job is to prepare for that. And we've been doing a good job of that. And we have a future ahead of us that allows us to say that we've prepared for this and we've been proactive. Increased investments in transit and infrastructure for walking and biking. To encourage those to make more sustainable choices. We have a lot of people that would like to take a different mode other than jumping in their car, whether that's because they don't want the congestion or frankly, they just don't want to drive. That's great. And those opportunities that exist, we want to help support and incentivize in many ways because we want to ensure that we have a system that all complements each other. Sufficient and reliable funding, we can't do any of this. We can't maintain the network. We can't maintain the system unless we have sufficient and reliable funding. So we could argue all day long, we're not going to build our way out of congestion. That is true. But we're also not going to build the future of the transportation system in Oregon without investments. We can't change the footprint of what we put in place into something that's better for tomorrow until we invest in it. And so that's in front of us as well. And then people and goods are able to travel freely, efficiently, sustainable, contributing to the economy. Most of you across the state already know we are a net export state. We rely heavily, our economy relies heavily on the exports, and we have truck traffic that carries much of our economy in the state of Oregon. Our partner states to the north and south are in a very similar position. We have to make sure that we can continue to move that freight and those goods and services on the system because that's how our economy moves. And I hate to sound cliche, but that's so important to our overall long-term health. And that's part of our responsibility. Next slide. So our vision is to create options where we get people and things where they need to go reliably, safely, efficiently, increase the options and the accessibility and the availability so that people can make a choice that they have in front of them. We want to serve all users of the system. That's individuals, families, businesses, communities, the economy, all of those things that I've been talking about up until this point. And we want to build and maintain a system that meets our needs now and into the future. We are constantly thinking about what the system might be 20, 30, 40 years from now, because again, that's our responsibility and we have to do that. That is our future look. And all of the things that I was discussing earlier in the presentation lead towards that. I'll also say, in this vision, in order for us to accomplish this, in order for us to look out into the future and to see what we might be able to accomplish and set the tone for in the state of Oregon, we need each of you. We can't do this alone. When I say we, it's not me and the leadership team. It is almost 5,000 of us and then our partner agencies as well. This doesn't get done without you. And honestly, our industry, so the transportation industry and the transportation sector has a natural bias towards talking about the things that we do, the things that we build, and the things that can be accomplished that we can look back at, 20 years from now and see the concrete and asphalt. We envision a transportation industry, though, that actually is focusing on people, because it's about the people. It is about all of you and all of those that we serve, the 4.5 million Oregonians. That is why we do the work that we do. I don't do the work that I'm doing because I hope for a bridge one day, although in some areas I hope for a bridge one day. I do the work that I do because it matters to people. And each of you, I believe, is here for that same reason. And I think that's important for us to recognize. It is the people of this state. It is the people that we have yet to welcome to this state because of all this state has to offer. That's why we do the work that we do. Next slide. So I want to say thank you. I want to thank you for the remarkable progress. You saw earlier, we're halfway through the projects. Projects for House Bill 2017 don't occur without you. Again, it's about the people. The efficient and effective work on the IIJA. The IIJA, we just worked with the commission over less than a 5-month period to allocate $400 million on different programs in a highly controversial space. That was fantastic work. That happened because of each of you. Our quick response in developing EV infrastructure investments. As many of you by now know, the $50 million that we had on the screen before in federal investment for EV infrastructure, our commission doubled that. And so we're now looking to $100 million in EV infrastructure. Again, being an early adopter, being out in front and recognizing the change before it occurs. Highway 217 and 205 are going to construction. It shows the strategy is working, and that strategy is built on partnership and people. Again, as I mentioned before, it doesn't happen without those within the agency. Excuse me. Resolving the backlogs and providing customer service in difficult times. We have had a tumultuous couple of years. You've all had that. In fact, the entire world has had that. Even though the entire world has gone through that, it doesn't make it any less difficult for those that have been standing behind a counter serving customers throughout the entire pandemic and recognizing that those face-to-face interactions potentially either increase risk or at least increase nerves in those conversations and the things that we're working on. We've resolved the backlog. The DMV team and the Commerce and Compliance team have actively and aggressively taken on those customer service approaches and been innovative in doing so. To continue to deliver service to Oregonians. Again, it's about people. And as we think about the things that they've delivered in these times, it's nothing short of amazing. And I'm really proud of the work that they've done. And I say they've done because honestly, there is nothing I could do where I'm sitting that makes that better. The work had to happen within each of those divisions. And I'm proud to say that I get to work alongside them. Keeping our transportation system moving on a day-to-day basis and responding to emergencies, whether that's wildfire, whether that's snow removal or what have you. All of these things have been moving. And I have to say, thank you. I want to thank DMV. I want to thank Commerce and Compliance. I want to thank our maintenance staff. I want to thank each and every employee that is so vital to our One ODOT strategy, our One ODOT mission. It's so vital to delivery for all Oregonians. Again, there's 4.5 million Oregonians across the state that rely on the services and the things that each of you provide. That needs a thank you because the last 2.5 years especially has been very difficult. I know it's been difficult for me personally, and it pales in comparison to what it has been for probably each of you in a very different way. So thank you. Next slide. So that's the transition to employee engagement survey results. Now, I can also tell you that as we transition to the next slide, probably the worst time you can ever think of going through an employee survey is right after a worldwide pandemic, right after a leadership transition, right after a lot of changes in the sector that you work in, and right after a high level of anxiety and frustration for the world that we have to deal with now that might feel a little different than it did 3 or 4 years ago. That said, none of that's an excuse for where we sit because we're all feeling what we're feeling. So as we think about employee engagement results at a glance, 59% of our agency feels engaged. I think that's good. And as we think about what it has meant to be engaged over the last couple of years, I think this is positive. I'll skip over the equip factors because I want to congratulate our managers. Manager effectiveness, And that's, again, that's not me. That's not the most immediate leadership team. We're talking about first line, frontline managers and everybody else within each of the divisions, 71% effectiveness. That is huge. That is a fantastic testament to each of you, recognizing that it's about the people. And I want to thank you for that and appreciate that. Equip factors is 63%. The equip factors is a fancy way of saying all those things you need to do your job, whether that is equipment or whether it's training or whether it's any of those factors that help you be successful in your job. 63% feeling like they have enough. Again, so you see in each of these more work to do, right? Obviously, because we would all aspire to be sitting at 100%. But given where we've been in the world, this is an okay place to be. Next slide. As we look at the engagement index, you can see a relative average. I rarely think about looking for a new job with another organization, about half of our employees. So we've got some work to do here. And it's important for us to recognize that this is just a fantastic place to work, even though it doesn't always feel that way. The pressure is on each of you. The highlight is on each of you, each and every one of us. And people have a lot of expectations for us. Again, as I mentioned before, we don't get the benefit of saying, if not us, then who? Without feeling the weight of what that actually means as we think about delivering our work. And that's not lost on me. But I'm happy to see that we have engagement of 59%. And we're committed to continuing to work on that and increase the engagement. Next slide. Key drivers of engagement, areas that are driving the most impact for the overall agency. Next slide. I feel supported in my efforts to adapt to changes, 58%. That's pretty good. ODOT values my contribution. I'm here to tell you we value everybody's contribution, even when it doesn't feel like it. And I know that that's difficult and it's easy to say and harder to reflect. So I recognize that. I feel a sense of purpose in my work. This is fantastic, 72%. So people are feeling like the service they provide is really having an impact with people. I think that's great. And treated with dignity and respect, 71%. Again, that is good. We are heading in the right direction. There's open and honest two-way communication. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that 43%, we have a lot of work to do. And so we're committed as a leadership team, as well as driving commitments through the agency to increase that engagement. Part of today is increasing that engagement to really open up the dialogue and have a conversation so that everybody knows what we're thinking. And by the way, it's more than just us. This is how we're interacting kind of across our peer groups. It's how we're interacting across divisions. Do we have open and honest two-way dialogue? And is it welcomed in our agency? It should be. We want to get better. 43% is not a reflection of where we want to be. Next slide. Equip factors. I won't spend a ton of time here other than to see that departments collaborate effectively to help the organization be more successful. As we look at the others, I think they reflect kind of that average of equip factors, equipped with the training, equipped with the tools that we need, whether that's safety or what have you, to do our job. Collaborating effectively across lines to be more successful. It's an area we've been working on and we need to continue to work on because that's not easy. You're all busy. I mentioned before, like I said, if it's not us, then who, which means you've got a full day already. And so sometimes it doesn't feel like you need to talk to those peer groups kind of across a different division, or it doesn't feel like maybe to us that we've missed a step in communicating where we're going or what have you. And so we need to be intentional about that. Anything we're not intentional about, we won't do. I've said that a lot, and I believe that to be true. So we have to increase our intentionality to collaborate across different work groups within the organization. Next slide. Again, this is the congratulatory moment. A 71% effectiveness rate for manager effectiveness, that's huge. That means you all care about each other. It means you care about your teams. It means you care about your employees. It means you care about your supervisors. That's great. Do we want to see that get better? Of course, that's the goal. The goal is always to get to 100%, but you should really be proud of the fact that in your work groups, manager effectiveness is at a 71%. That is huge, and that's a testament to each of you caring about each other and the well-being of each other so that you can continue to deliver for Oregonians. Next slide. So the drivers of manager effectiveness, again, I won't spend all of my time going through each one, but I do want to show some of the correlating factors. So great correlating factors, 74%, immediate supervisor providing me with timely and helpful feedback. That feedback is really important, whether it's congratulatory feedback or constructive. In either of those cases, it's really important so that we can increase performance and recognize how we're doing. Because if we don't have somebody telling us How do we know? We only have our own reflection and our own look in the mirror. All the way down to the bottom, though, where we see 43% again on the open and honest two-way communication. I want to focus on the honesty and the two-way because that's so important. We have to be direct and honest with each other. If we're not, people see through that because, again, people are smart, right? And so we'll see through each of those if we're not honest. And the other is two-way. It has to be a dialogue. It doesn't mean that everything that somebody puts on the table is going to be endorsed by the broader organization. But it does mean an open dialogue about why that isn't the case, or it does mean that an open dialogue to help inform maybe a change in what we're doing is absolutely what we should be focusing on. Next slide. Other highlights, again, communication, that was key. It's one of the high level factors of the things that we need to work on at the leadership level and within the agency. Increasing safety. We do really well in that regard as far as the awareness and the understanding. Everybody's safety is of personal importance to me. I've worked in the construction industry for the predominant amount of my career, and I can tell you that you guys all do dangerous work, not just in the construction industry, but kind of across the board. So looking out for each other, respecting each other, and having the equipment that it takes to work safe is of significant importance to us. Future vision and trust and survey credibility. I'm going to lump each of those together because each of those is an important factor as we think about what we're going to do with this. So I can tell you that I'm not a fan of asking questions that we're not willing to do something about. And so we put the survey out and we're now reacting to the survey responses to see what are the opportunities for change and improvement based upon what we're hearing in the survey. We're going to do our very best and continue to push for engaging in conversations that show that we actually are listening. And we is much broader than 1 or 5 or 12 people that sit in the leadership realms of the agency, because we have leaders all across the agency. I'm a firm believer that from every chair in this agency, you lead to somebody or to a group of somebodies across this state. And that's important. Each of you is leaders and has an accountability and a responsibility with that. And we rely on that because you all have better connections than maybe a lot of us do in some of the other areas of the state. Trust is important, though. You have to be able to trust the things that you're hearing, whether that's from me, whether that's from each other, or whether that's from your staff. And so we want to build on that, recognizing that we might be at a trust deficit, and we want to increase the trust so that there's an understanding that that's important and vital to our communication goals. Next slide. So for communication, again, the same metric, 43%. I won't dwell on that other than to say 51% overall for communication and 43% in two-way open dialogue. We need to improve on that. And that's going to take engagement and conversation. I firmly believe it's not an email that comes from me. It's not an email that comes from your manager within your work group. It's a conversation. And so we're going to increase those levels of conversation. We've been doing that already. I hope that you have seen some of that. And I would love your feedback as to how that's working. Next slide. Safety, again, I mentioned before, I think we're doing pretty well here, but we can always improve. Any injuries at all, any fatalities at all from any employees or those contracted staff that we work with is too many. A single one is too many. We want to increase the awareness and the understanding. I'll take this as a win from where we sit right now for the level of understanding and awareness that employees feel like we all care about each other from a safety perspective. That's huge, but I want to continue to get better. Next slide. Future vision. Senior leadership of ODOT has communicated a vision of the future that motivates me. Well, I guess that's on us. So part of the conversation today is really trying to instigate some of that. We know that it's going to take more than today. We know that some of the conversations that we've been having have felt like they've been in a vacuum with a few people and maybe not with the broader audience. And we know that there might be gaps in relaying information from where the vision of the agency is. I can tell you that we have a strong vision coming from the commission. I've been working towards establishing that vision, whether that's the urban mobility strategy or a strategic action plan, and saying what are the things that are important to us. And those aren't the only two things, by the way. I want to be clear. Those are just two examples. And our senior leadership team has been driving some of that as well. This shows that we have to do better, though, at getting out and having that conversation and recognizing that either it's not landing with everybody or it's not making it to everybody. So there is a reality here where some of the messages just aren't finding their way into all areas of the agency. That's true. That's clear in the responses that we have. There is also a potential reality where there might be disagreement in the fact that we have broadened our focus to be more than just a roadway agency. And again, that's not about individuals. That is about a transportation sector that is driving us there. And had we not been starting to evolve as an agency to recognize that we serve more than just roadway needs in our state, we wouldn't be in a position to receive all the federal funding that we've been positioned to receive. So these are important conversations for us to have, because if they're not landing, then we need to do a better job. And I recognize that we've got some work to do here as a leadership team. And again, today is the start of some of that. And hopefully this will instigate more conversations. Next slide. Trust, I will put in the same category as the vision of the agency. If you don't trust the vision or you don't see a vision, you're not going to trust the things that we're going. So ODOT shows a commitment to ethical business decisions and conduct. That should be much higher than 53%. But trusting the senior leadership of ODOT 37%, that's obviously not where we want to be. So we have an obligation to do better for you. And we're starting to do that. And we're doing our very best to recognize that that conversation sometimes is going to come simply from access. Sometimes it's going to come from disagreement. And we've got to find a way to work through those conversations, because two-way communication, as we saw earlier, is vital to that. Next slide. Taking action. So the survey credibility. So what I heard more than anything in the survey was, or from people going into the survey was, we take these things all the time. And when we take them, nobody does anything with them. Well, that's not helpful. And so we can't take the survey and then hope for a change in the future if we haven't taken intentional steps to do something about it. And so that's what we're trying to do now. Is it going to be perfect for everybody? Absolutely not. We're making our best to go out and have conversations with folks to say, how can we demonstrate to you that the survey matters? So again, today is a starting point for that. I recognize that today is not going to be a light switch moment for each and every one of you. That's okay, and that's understandable. But it's that constant demonstration from me, from our leadership team, from each of your managers within each of your work groups, that the things that we're hearing in the survey are things worth addressing and being intentional about talking to each of you about. Believe that positive change will occur as a result of the survey, 25%. While I am thankful that at least 25% saw that as a benefit, 75% that didn't is not necessarily the metric that I'm shooting for. And if we see the not sure, okay, so I'll change my 75% to 50, but we still need to recognize that we have some work to do there. And that's, again, what we're trying to do now. Next slide. So the next steps. You've all seen this in the messages that I sent out and the survey team has sent out. But reiterating them so that you are aware. Assistant directors and the division administrators' first goals have been submitted, and these are the goals towards increasing engagement and accountability to the survey responses. The survey planning team continues to analyze the data to look for areas of improvement. Again, we want to mine the data to understand exactly what are those triggers that can help us improve in some of those areas. More site visits and hybrid events like this, we are hoping for to help increase the dialogue. I want to tell you, though, that we can't increase the level of effectiveness if I'm not hearing in these conversations. So I really want to welcome that until you say something I don't like, and then I don't want to welcome it at all. I'll try and dodge that. And then please continue to share your ideas with us. So all kidding aside, we do want to hear it. And I'll do my best to answer it in a way that each of you finds valuable. And I'll do my best to work on addressing those things that take tangible actions and intentional steps towards improvement, because that's why we're here. Next slide. Q&A. So we've got a small number of people in the room. We've got more folks that have sent in questions from elsewhere. We clearly won't be able to get to all of them, but maybe what I'll do is I'll turn to our team here, and they can guide me through the first series of questions that I will do my best to address.
For our first logistical step, you can step that way so you don't have to be in the.
Can I drink water?
Absolutely. And then we'll get you back on camera, but not with the blue light in your face.
Sure. So I think our first question from the chat is from Jim Fleck. So where is the agency at with expanding the road usage charge program, making it or some version of it the primary funding mechanism to replace the gas tax?
Yeah, so Jim, thank you for that question. As we think about the road usage charge being the primary funding mechanism, I will admit we've got some work to do in front of us. You can't turn a light switch on that, just like you can't turn a light switch on employee engagement with one conversation. But what we can do is continue to reinforce the team that's working on that, and then bring in the awareness to those decision makers that are outside the agency. I firmly believe that one step towards a successful road usage charge program is being able to implement congestion pricing in the Portland region to demonstrate confidence in the things that we can do. And I think we are continuing to do that with the RUC program and building on the successes. The RUC team has done a fantastic job of increasing awareness and demonstrating the workability of something that frankly a lot of people see as difficult. And we've been the model across the country and we continue to expand on that model. But to your point, it is vital that we create a path that allows us to transition to that as a sustainable and a reliable funding mechanism, because it's probably the most equitable way for us to engage all Oregonians and frankly users outside of Oregon in a way that allows all users to pay into the system in the most equitable manner because it's based upon what they use in the system. We're continuing to have those conversations. Again, we don't make all those decisions internally. Our team has done a significant amount of work to poise us and get us ready for what that means for legislative audiences to make decisions as we go forward.
Awesome. Let's see. The next question is from Amanda Salyer. 2022 was the third consecutive year ODOT was notified by FHWA we are not meeting our federal transportation safety performance measures, specifically as they relate to reducing fatal and serious injury crashes. This is obviously a significant concern and it will take a coordinated effort among the silos toward the goal of reducing fatal and serious injury crashes to make it a reality. What is the agency's plan to address this? Is there any conversations about making this definition of safety its own SAP goal, the strategic action plan goal?
Yeah, so great question, Amanda. Let me start by saying there's been a lot of recognition and understanding of the things that we're experiencing right now. There's anomalies, and I say anomalies not because they are oddities, but because they are increases, and we're experiencing that across the country. It's not just Oregon. As we think about safety and we think about serious and fatal, our goal should be Vision Zero. And has to continue to be zero as we think about the transportation system. That's our job. And again, as I said before, if not us, then who? We're experiencing a lot of externalities right now that I think are impacting that. And I think at times that might create a level of complacency in the industry. I don't say complacency amongst staff within ODOT or myself, but I think at times the industry is very quick to say, well, it's distracted driving or it's these things, those things. Well, all of those things are true. But it doesn't stop us from being able to do something. So, for example, in the Portland area, we had a tragic incident of a pedestrian fatality, and we immediately jumped into with the help of the agency, the help of each and the commission into an investment strategy that allowed us to put $10 million towards the most dangerous corridors that we have across the state. That is huge because it showed us that we can react quickly. It showed us that we have the ability to react. And it showed us that we have needs in front of us to address those safety issues that are changing in front of us, quite honestly, and that are different from maybe what they were 10 years ago. Our job, though, is to continue to look at those things that we can evaluate and control. So education isn't going to solve it on its own, although that is a big tool. The more we can get people to put their phones down, for example, the less likely they are to be distracted when they're sitting in a vehicle. Those distractions are contributing to some of these serious and fatal crashes. But there's a lot of other data that we have and we collect, and the things that we can do in our decision making, and the things that we design, the geometry can help, education can continue to help, conversations can continue to help. Our plan as an agency is to continue to evolve and recognize that we have to have those conversations, and we have to continue to push towards Vision Zero. I think there's a question in the room.
Oh,
I wonder if I can ask a question here.
yeah, of course.
Oh, everybody can hear me. Actually, I see big improvements for two-way communication because, as a staff, I was invited to participate in this meeting, between
Good.
staff and the managers.
Good.
Also, you had a new officer. I welcome the new officer. So you said equity. And this question maybe for both of you is like, we talk about the systemic discrimination. But can you give one or two specific examples? What is, systemic discrimination?
Sure. Yeah. So the question for those that may not have been able to hear is we talk about systemic discrimination that might exist within the transportation sector or within some of the decisions we make. And giving a few examples. Let me give one that is a project-based example, for example. So years ago, and when I say we, it's, ODOT, but it was government. Government made decisions to intentionally displace communities of color in some of our government-placed facilities. So whether that is freeway expansion and freeway siting, whether that is convention center siting, or whether that is where we have some large government buildings for school administration and those kinds of things. Government made decisions that intentionally displaced some portions of our community. It's hard to argue that portion of the community was not targeted and intentionally moved in order to create different outcomes that at least those decision makers within government felt were better for the future. We know that those were not only short-sighted, but racist decisions that led us to that path. So that's one. The other is we've built systems that make barriers and create barriers and house barriers for entry into the work that we do. A prime example, we recently did a disparity study that showed that there are well over 100 additional firms firms and construction companies that want to do business with ODOT in the state of Oregon than what we've historically counted in our disparity studies. That's huge. And they may not be COVID certified. They may not be firms that have worked with us before, but they want to work with us. But they've actively made the choice not to because we've created such a level of barrier to come to work within state government. And again, it's not just ODOT. I want to be crystal clear. We've participated, sometimes driven, sometimes been the sole decision makers, but other times been the recipients of other government decisions that have driven this systemic nature. But that is the definition of systemic as those barriers become so insurmountable that those that want to work with us simply can't, whether that's direct with us, whether that's a subcontract with us, whether that's through another state agency. We've created those barriers to where they're what we call barriers to entry. They can't even get their foot in the door for some of those businesses that are owned by either minority communities or disadvantaged communities that we've historically left out of the work.
Can I follow up on that? The barriers for access.
Yeah.
Okay. I just want to talk about the one ODOT situation. See if it's a HR recruitment process. I think it's for the long-term benefit of health of ODOT.
Sure.
I just want to mention that. I just want to talk about this situation in March. Allow me 1 minute. I won't take too long.
No, please. This is why we're here.
Our manager, transition planning analysis unit manager, retiring by the end of June. So the March starting hiring process. So the post jobs to the website. I mean, everywhere, everybody knows about it. So the deadline is May 7th. Of course, I came from Washington with 11 years of manager's job experience, public-private sector, and I applied for it. Okay. Because ODOT had a system that can reposting on the 7th. I'm not sure if I'm the first one or if I'm the only qualified candidate in that position application. Okay. So then is reposting and the reposting by changing the criteria. Is that access? I felt, honestly myself, I was denied equal opportunity. If I'm the only one, or if I'm the only one qualified for that situation, you keep posting, reposting, even though that was allowed by HR. Isn't that the case of a barrier causing for me? Maybe I should say one example. We do contract, the civil engineering contract. We contract out, you open the bids, then you find out this 5 applicants, only 1 qualified. Let's reopen the bids. Let's repost the contract and hire. So you already see the bids. Is that equal for the people 5 contracting who signed?
Who've already bid.
Yeah, who already been. So you already know their bids. Then you open again and again and change the criteria. Is that the barrier? Is that a systematic discrimination? That's why I'm asking this question.
Yeah, so a fair question. And so sometimes a little bit of the after you open the books and you see, are you changing the criteria to get a different look? And let me address it this way, and this won't be satisfactory to you. And I want to be clear about that. I'm not close enough to either of those activities to be able to say exactly the details. So I don't want to speak about specifics, but I will talk in generalities. That very well could be A barrier, absolutely. I would agree with you because as you think about the barriers as they present themselves, choice making comes into that, right? And so we have to consider what that means. Sometimes it can be though that we need greater competition because of price, or we need greater competition because if you only had one successful bidder, then maybe in a contract scenario, we weren't clear enough in the things that we provided about what we needed, right? And so those things are legitimate reasons to go back and have a conversation. That said, it's obviously probably not the case in all cases, right? And so I think that's where asking that question, and we'll take that back and we'll have a conversation.
Sorry, I don't mean to being like yes or no answer because
Sure.
sometimes they're very vague, okay?
Yeah.
But let's give a very simple example. Elementary school has a race. You know, the students come to run a race. Okay, then the one guy who's very good participated and the other guys maybe not good enough. Or then the coach said, oh, now we're not going to do the race. We're going to have another one, maybe next one, everybody comes.
Yeah.
But you already posted over months for the job participation.
Sure.
And you know, if he's the only one who is qualified for the race, and you're gonna take him out and then getting a lot of people, this is just elementary systematic question, simple.
Sure. Yeah, I understand. We'll go back and have the conversation with our HR team too about that specifically.
Yeah, it's in the system anyway.
We have another question from Denise. She says, we have a new CAO with different placement in the agency, reporting directly to the director. She feels this is a positive step, but could you share your thinking behind that?
Yeah, absolutely. So Denise, thank you for the question. The genesis of that was quite frankly, because we have a lot of internal operations. We saw the employee survey. We saw the needs of taking care of ourselves in order for us to take care of all of Oregonians, and that access and the ability to be engaged in some of those conversations so that we can make more actionable choices was intentional. I will give credit to the assistant directors. The assistant directors got together and said, this position, as we go back out, I know has not been a direct report to you, but should be sitting around the table so that we can inform decision-making as we go forward. So again, your leadership team recognizing not just the needs coming out of the survey, because that conversation started before the survey, but was reinforced with the survey and your assistant director leadership team really stepping into the fold. It's not an idea that I came up with, but I fully support it because as we think about the chief administrative officer, they play a vital role in the health of the agency, especially the internal function. And so bringing that voice and bringing that around the table was really important. I also want to say that our assistant director team socialized that and had conversations with all of our division administrators, and they were overwhelmingly supportive as well. And so I think it's one of those factors where we're listening to the needs of the agency and trying to respond structurally in order to get there. It won't be the only solution. Again, you've heard me say that over and over again. There's work to do, but we're excited about the opportunity, and Carolyn's going to be great.
This one's from Chris Bellamy. Are some of the federal dollars slated for improvements on rural state highways?
Chris, the shortest answer is yes. Although we haven't selected projects yet, at least not in every case, we had a significant influx in federal dollars coming in. They're not all going to the Portland region. I do want to daylight and own that you hear me talk about that because it's one of the charges that we have that, came out of House Bill 2017, as well as some of our commission direction. But it's not the only place we work. And in fact, it's not the only place that I'm working. We're working across the state and we're working in rural parts of Oregon as well. And that's important because again, our system is the entire state of Oregon, not just one area. So some of those federal dollars in the programmatic realm, whether that's bridges and pavements and those kinds of things that are coming in, will certainly be going all across the state of Oregon. You saw House Bill 2017, for example, projects all over that map. So that's going to the entire state of Oregon. And then the discretionary dollars that the commission just acted on, some of that going to all areas of Oregon as well. So short answer is yes, but clearly I can't give just a short answer.
This one's from Karen Ofierna. She says, as a DMV employee, she doesn't see how the service work she does fit in with the vision of the agency.
And who was that again?
Karen Ofierna.
Okay, Karen, thank you for that question. So let me describe an example. As we think about all of the aspects of the work that we do in the agency and the strategic action plan, for example, whether that's modernizing the system, sustainable and reliable funding, or bringing the lens of equity to all the things that we do. The DMV counter service work fits into all three of those categories, but let me really focus on the sustainable and reliable revenue. Without the work that you're doing, there is a significant amount of funds that come into the agency through the division of DMV that we wouldn't have without the work behind the counter. Not to mention the fact that we're modernizing the system, and you're modernizing the system and the system improvement and how Oregonians engage with you at DMV. So you are deeply invested. And while it may not feel like it, I think that's on us for not communicating to you maybe where we see that value, because I will tell you, I, for one, have had the benefit of visiting a few DMVs over the last 6 months. And I can tell you some of the hardest working individuals I've ever come across. And I'm really proud of the work that each of you do. And I'm proud that you let me come talk to you from time to time. And one of the things that I've noticed is I spend time looking over your shoulder and talking to you in between customers, because you have to serve those customers. And I get 2 or 3 minutes at a time, and that's it. That work is really reflected, not just in the strategic action plan, but in the needs of the overall agency. And that is so important to our existence and to the things that we do. The other place where I would tell you is to my earlier comment about people. Everything we do is about people, whether that's providing service on the roadway or whether that's providing service on the other side of the counter. It's about the people of Oregon who need those services in order to exist. And I know that that can sound a little bit cliche. We exist for them, but it is true. And so I don't really feel bad about saying it that directly. The work that you do from behind the counter fits in so many different areas of not just our strategic action plan, but where we're going as an agency and the service needs of Oregonians. It's vital to what we need and vital to what we do as an agency.
Let's see, this one's from Robbie Fast. Can you please address the workforce issues we have at hand? Recruiting issues, payroll issues, losing people to the private sector, et cetera.
Yeah, so Robbie, that's I keep saying these are great questions because they're all great questions. But the workforce issues that we're experiencing in ODOT are not unique to ODOT. What's unique to ODOT is ODOT has to do something about it. And so we're doing our very best to increase not just the awareness of the workforce issues, but to do our best to attract new talent, do our best to recognize the talent that's here, doing our best to understand that we're in a different climate right now. There was a time when the competition from government to private or what have you was a bit of a leveling, and we could go get staff, and the competition wasn't there in the same way that it is now. And it's really afforded us, a great foundation of staff for the agency. The Great Resignation, though, has impacted a lot of that. The societal focus on all of the response to the pandemic has impacted that. And what I can tell you is all across state government, we are experiencing workforce shortages, and we're experiencing workforce shortages in the private sector partners that we work with as well. I can't tell you where they've all gone. I can't tell you where everybody has gone because they are still out there. They're still making a living and the economy is still moving, save a few things that have been bumpy over the last couple of weeks. But I can tell you that we're all experiencing the same difficulties, and it's, I don't want to say dire, but it's more significant than I've seen in my career. In addition to that, we all play a role in building on how to guide people into our agency. So you heard me say during the earlier presentation, I think and I believe that everybody leads from the chair they're in. There is no greater advocate for the work that each of you do than you. And if you can advocate for those that are out there searching for the next great opportunity they could have in their career, you're going to sell them a lot better than I am. And at the end of the day, we need that. We need the recognition from each of you that it's going to take that partnership. Go out and attract people that you know are good, solid individuals that can come contribute to the state of Oregon, because we need that. We're competing now in a global market in ways where people can sit from home and do work that they 2 years ago had to report to individual work sites across the country. It's just our reality. We have engineers now, for example, that used to have a travel commute to all different places of the country that now can perform the majority of their work from one place. That's a competitive advantage for those that can employ somebody in that kind of environment, right? And so we have to be looking at those opportunities because we have impacts across the board. It's not just in our engineering ranks. It's not just at DMV counter service. It's not just with our Commerce and Compliance division. The other thing we have to continue to work on, and I can tell you that we're working on it, but it is an uphill climb, and that is we have to bring a level of compensation, whether that's the whole package of compensation, because that's important to some people in a different way than salary, or salary alone. We have to continue to work on those things because compensation is a driving factor in where people go. There are two main factors that at least I've seen in my career. Please don't assign this to science because the HR team can actually give you the science behind this. But I will tell you this, people work for their employer, their manager, and they work for their salary and their compensation package. And then those things contribute to, does it contribute to a broader good of the things that I want to do with my life? You guys can all help sell the things that Oregon and ODOT does specifically to that broader good for Oregonians, and we're looking for help there. And I saw hands shooting up.
Follow-up?
Please.
I think the survey result said 6 out of 10 of us will do that. We'll go out to our friends and say like, yeah,
Yep.
you work for ODOT, right?
Yep.
The other 4% or the other 4 are, maybe it's related to the trust.
Yeah.
The, communication thing, right? To get the rest of us also saying the same thing. But I think what people want to hear is how are you advocating for workforce relief? So when you say to the legislature, yes, we're meeting expectations of House Bill 2017,
Yep.
at the sacrifice of the workforce, like how are you explaining that to the legislator? How and when, how often? We want to know that you're advocating at those levels for us. And I don't think we've heard that story yet. And maybe that's for another time.
No, actually, it's for not just another time because we can go into that deeper, but let me answer just how am I advocating? And I'll just speak for myself personally. So there's a couple of things to consider. One is you have to advocate because without the advocacy, you aren't heard, right? And so that's, I think, to your point, right? Where am I playing that role? And I can tell you that I'm having those conversations with the commission and with legislative leadership. The other part of advocacy, though, is having that conversation in a way that's compelling to the recipient and to the decision maker. And that is where the delivery that I mentioned before, that is where all those intangible things. So you heard me say earlier, we have a natural bias in our industry to talk about the things we do and not the people that do it, right? When I go over to the legislature and have a conversation with them, it's the things that we're able to accomplish that are most compelling. It doesn't mean they don't care about state employees, quite the opposite. I've seen a legislative care for staff across state government that I honestly didn't expect and I hadn't seen earlier in my career from other places where I've been. That said, it needs to equate to some of those outcomes and we're doing that. But that's where the conversation or the entryway to that conversation has to occur so that we can then have these other conversations. I mentioned earlier that we'd have a legislative conversation. So coming up in the 23 legislative session, we'll be having conversations about an I-5 bridge and funding for that. And right now I've been starting to build and our leadership team's been starting to build conversations and awareness around that maintenance and operations funding. That maintenance and operations funding and a conversation around that is a conversation around people. It is a conversation of us advocating for those that are doing the work that doesn't show up in a project base, right? Or at least not directly to a legislator on a project base. So we are having those conversations. I am asking for trust that those conversations are occurring because they're not as visible to everybody all the time, but we're trying to make them more visible when we've actually had a presentation as such in front of a joint committee on transportation.
Follow up to that. So, I personally have heard you say to employees that we are low on resources. We each can only do so much. We have a lot of mission to meet and we can't do it all.
Mhm.
And that it's okay to say no.
Mhm.
But I don't know that I've seen that, and maybe I haven't looked, but I don't know that I've seen that agency wide. And I do know from hearing from managers especially, just the sense of overwhelming amounts of work and stress. How can we all help to tell each other that it's okay to not get every single thing done?
Yeah, so that is a great question. Let me start first with where I sit with my privilege. I have the privilege of being able to say that and not feel the pressure of what that might mean from other people around me. So let me be clear there. I want to recognize that if you're a manager, especially at a mid-level within the agency, it might be something that's nice and easy to say, but you still have the expectations that you feel are coming on you in a way that feels like delivery, right? And so I want to appreciate that tension. And I will tell you, I came up through DOT world. So I started at the designer level and at the construction inspector level and on up through management. And so I know what those pressures are. And I know what it's like to have somebody say, We can't do all things for all people, even though you also heard me say about us then who, right? So we can't be all things to all people, but we still have to get those things done. And so that's an important factor, and that's an important pressure that I would just want to put on the table because it's real for those managers, especially at the mid-level. I'll also say though, in addition to that, it is about prioritization and the things that we can choose to take off our plate. We won't always have a choice. So for example, if you look at the federal criteria that we put up for funding, programmatically, we are going to target each and every one of those areas because Oregonians deserve us to target those funding allocations so that we can invest back in Oregonians, right? That money is being, in some ways, we're all paying into that system, right? Every person is paying into that system. So why not get as much of it back into Oregon as we can, right? That's the way that I view it. Because any dollar we pass up from the feds isn't coming back into our pocket by not spending it, right? We're spending it anyway. So it means that at each of the manager level, we're asking you to think critically about the things that you're working on and the programmatic areas that you're working on and say, what are the things that we can live without? And so that's the number of things, the type of things, those kinds of things, and you're all best suited to make those decisions more than I am. That said, then there also has to be a recognition, and I think we saw that in our latest e-board request, that even with the reductions in things that we can't get to or we shouldn't be working on as much as these other priorities, we're still at a position of overwork. And this is where I get back to the legislature, I think, helping to support us. Now, I won't talk about salaries, but I will talk about a support in staffing. We just went in front of the emergency board 2 weeks ago, and we put a pretty significant staffing request in front of them. And I will tell you that with the legislative conversations that I've been a part of, there's probably nothing more difficult than asking for new revenue and asking for staff. And we went in front of them and we asked them for budget allocation in adjustment there, not new revenue, but then we asked for staff. And the legislature endorsed that in an emergency board, recognizing that we need to bring more people in. Now, one could argue we're having a hard time recruiting, we're having a hard time bringing people in, and you ask for more staff, geez, it still feels like a pretty weighty thing that we have to deal with. And that's true. But I do want the managers within the agency to recognize we're not asking everybody to put on a cape. We are asking people to do what they can do, lead with their heart, and lead with the things that they need to do, and recognize they're not going to get everything done. We do want to make sure that we accomplish in our priority areas. Make no mistake, I'm all about driving hard and delivery, but I'm also realistic. And I do want to make sure that those messages are finding their way to managers. I would also implore everybody who has the privilege of sitting in a position to manage another manager, to recognize what that might mean for them, especially as you move within the ranks of an agency. Again, I started this by saying I've got a lot of privilege because I can say you can't do everything, right? And from where I sit, probably a lot of you are saying, yeah, that's great coming from that guy, right? But we need to recognize that the pressures that are finding themselves, especially in the middle management, are real. We have to do our part to try and pull some of that off for them as well. A longer answer than I'm sure you were looking for, but.
Are there any other questions in the room? Yep.
I'm with facilities and we're responsible for the care and maintenance of about 1,200 buildings in Oregon.
Thank you for that, by the way.
Oh, you're welcome. Been a pleasure. We currently have 8 people to do the day-to-day care and maintenance of all our buildings. And we've spent several years of doing all justification and kind of showing the need, but we still can't get any people. We've had some great leadership from Randy Gankler and Aaron Eddy, and but they can only do so much without the needed staff.
Sure. So I'm assuming the question is, what can we do about that? Yeah. Well, let me say in a way that's not heartwarming at all for you, that you're not alone. I hear that a lot. I hear that a lot from a lot of different places within the agency. So, all kidding aside, we are asking for you to be resourceful, figure out ways to maybe bring in contract help and those kinds of things. We've also been, I think, pretty active in asking the legislature for more positions kind of across the board. And while I can't tell you where every one of those positions was allocated or where it's going, we've got the teams that are working on that. I can say that the advocacy is occurring and bubbling up to get to that legislative ask. Within each specific work area, we need all of you and all of the managers kind of coming to the table to really allocate what those needs are and have that conversation. And I hear you saying that that's happening. I can't tell you where all of the, like I said, where all the positions have gone, but certainly that is a statewide conversation. The other thing I will say is we have historically had a presence within our agency where we have silos of this position is important for me and I'm not going to let go of it, even though it might be vacant or whatever, because I may not get it back. We're trying to take an agency-wide position management approach that kind of awakens that partnership feel for us so that we can better manage the ebbs and flows of what those position needs might be. So while I'm not best suited to probably address the question right off, that is the general goal that we're trying to employ with an agency-wide position management strategy more than just individual subgroups, and then having that bubble up into an ask that we then get to take across to the legislature and see if they're willing to accept it. And again, so far, happy to report we had a pretty successful emergency board. I'm really thankful to the legislature for that. Specifics for your work area, though, we'll certainly take that back and talk with the team and ask them just where those positions have gone.
This might be sort of a hybrid of various questions, but I think getting to the idea of will you allow sort of continued remote work? And if we continue to do that level of remote work, what are some of the agency's plans for, still building camaraderie and connecting people to their coworkers and teams?
Yeah, so that's probably a question coming from dozens of people, so it's good that we've rolled that up. Will we allow remote work, and is remote work still in our future? Absolutely. As we think about the future of the work industry, we talked before about, and I don't mean just our industry, excuse me, but the workforce across the board. I don't just mean our industry. I mean beyond ODOT, beyond the transportation sector. What you see is a workforce shortage across the board because work is different now and people are doing it differently and actually accomplishing just as much, if not more. And so as we think about that, we have to be in that game, right? If we're not in the game of that work, then we're not necessarily going to be competitive. The other is we've seen that it brings significant tangible benefits to people for their home life. And happier people, I think, even though it certainly may not show that everybody's happy, but happier people with opportunities available to them actually are happier when they come to work as well. And so, yes, it is in our future. We do want to continue. We started in the pandemic of about 300 to 400 people that had some form of remote work agreement. We transitioned quickly to about 1,800 over 3-4 days or whatever. That was a huge testament to those that work in the realm of getting us home and allowing us to do that work from home. I mean, what a feat. We proved that, and you proved that that was a possibility. We set the targets for the rest of the state agencies, I have to tell you. And so that's going to be in our future going forward. That said, I'm not the one to define what days you should and shouldn't be and those kinds of things. That needs to happen at the manager level. And so that's where that effective two-way communication needs to come in. That's where that has to be more than just me saying thou shalt, or this is the things that need to come forward. Our expectation is that each of the work groups understand what can be done remotely and what can't, and that are driving and understanding, allowing that flexibility for employees to do that. We are in a different realm. We have to adapt to that different realm. And lo and behold, that different realm is still allowing us to be productive. And so isn't that a good thing? Right. And so we still anticipate a target of at least 1,500 that have some kind of remote work status. That's a pretty significant number for an agency of our size and the work that we do. And it's not available to everybody. And I get that. And I understand that it's not available to everybody. But for those that it is, we should be allowing that opportunity. And I'm asking managers to work cooperatively to figure out ways to engage, because that engagement piece is lacking. And I recognize that working from home and seeing people in 2D and not being able to engage with somebody directly is a lot more difficult. It's new for us. And when I say new for us, you could argue, well, we've been in this for 2 years. So is it really that new? Except for the fact that For the last 2 years, it hasn't been a choice. Now it's a choice. We're active in that choice. We're being intentional about that choice, which now says we have to be intentional about what it means to engage. I do think people coming in and having a conversation face to face with others when it's safe to do so brings a significant amount of value. And I think that that should be something that is worked at each of the work group levels so that it's not something that feels forced, but it's something that feels desired. I can tell you personally for myself, we have in-person meetings with the executive strategy team. And I find that fulfilling and engaging when we can have that interaction. I also find that I'm able to have a few more breaks in my day, to be honest with you, because everybody's back to back to back to back on a Zoom call right now. And so we have to increase ways to engage. The agency's working on that. We've asked the employee engagement team to continue to work on tools that might be available for us to continue to engage. But we are asking that managers help to recognize the fact that that engagement is lacking and it has to take intentional action in order for us to make a change. All right. So I think we are wrapping up. For some of you, I'm sure you're saying, thank goodness that we are wrapping up because we're tired of him monologuing at us. For others, I'm sure we left some questions unanswered. The goal of this, again, was intended to be interactive. It's intended to create a hybrid opportunity to get out and have conversations with more people, but also for those that came in person, I want to thank you for that. We want to increase the number of people that can and want to come in person as well, because I think there's real value in having that conversation. That said, we want to be accessible across the state and across the agency. I recognize we haven't answered all of your questions and that there's more work to do. I want you to know that we care about each and every one of you, and that from my own personal perspective, I'm really proud of the work that we do as an agency, and I'm proud to say that I get to work alongside you. Even when you hear something that you don't necessarily enjoy or like, or vice versa, when I hear something that I don't necessarily enjoy or like, I think that makes us better and it increases our level of communication. And I want to open up that dialogue. So I look forward to more of these, and I look forward to your feedback as to how well this worked or didn't work. Recognizing that I know I can't answer every one of your questions satisfactorily, but I will do my best each and every time that I come in front of you. So with that, I do want to say thank you for what you do. Thank you for your contribution to the state of Oregon and to each other. And I appreciate each and every one of you and who you are. Thank you. Until next time. Bye-bye.